นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings. Sometimes people ask where the practice of metta bhavana that we were talking about earlier, where it fits into the Noble Eightfold Path. So like many aspects of the many aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path, it appears and it supports different parts of the whole. So for example, the development of right view, sammaditthi, one aspect of that might be recognizing the value of metta as an object of mind, goodwill, understanding karma, that metta is a very powerful conditioning force in the mind, that when developed as an intention, then it leads to skillful speech, skillful action. And that leads on to, say, the practice of right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood. These are all encompassing the practice of metta, goodwill. The opposite of metta or goodwill is ill will, anger, irritation. All of these more negative and harmful states of mind. When we act or speak with ill will, then the results are destructive. Destructive to ourselves, destructive to others. And we make negative karma that comes back on us, not only in the immediate moment. A moment of ill will is already unpleasant, accompanied by a painful feeling, may lead to problems with other people suffering as well as our own, physical and mental suffering. But then if we act with ill will, such as if we kill or steal or engage in sexual misconduct, tell lies and so on, well, this can come back on us later on as well. So it's like double suffering. You create suffering in the present moment when you indulge a thought of ill will, and then you have the karma to contend with this life and maybe even future lives. So establishing right view helps you to see the role of metta, cultivating goodwill, the benefits of that, the supportive nature of goodwill for our meditation, for our livelihood, for our relations with the world around us. And it helps you to avoid acting with ill will. So already by developing right view, listening to the Dhamma, reflecting on the Dhamma, it will lead you to see the benefit, the value of cultivating metta, for example, as a wholesome Dhamma, a wholesome state of mind. And so with right view, this directly supports right intention, samma sankappa. Right intention, particularly the intention of non-ill will, or the intention of goodwill, one of the three right intentions that the Buddha talked about. It's something to be cultivated. Once you understand the benefit of metta, then you cultivate it consciously, deliberately, because it has a very powerful effect, wholesome effect on our mind, closely related to non-cruelty, ahimsa, sankappa, non-cruelty, non-hatred. If you're cultivating goodwill, it's difficult for the mind to dwell with hatred towards another person, or to seek revenge even to someone who's hurt us, say. Even the first aspect of sammasankappa, nekama sankappa, the practice of renunciation, letting go of attachment to sense objects and sensuality. In a way, metta supports that, because if you're cultivating goodwill, it makes you more sensitive to others, more caring of others. And you'll notice when you're caught into a lot of sensual attachment and desire, you become more selfish, more self-centered. And the practice of metta is countering that, reducing that. So it works together very well with nekama sankappa. Even the practice of right effort is going to be closely linked to the practice of developing metta. Right effort, the effort to prevent unskillful states of mind that haven't yet arisen from arising, and the effort to abandon those unskillful states that have arisen. So cultivating metta can be very much a preventative effort towards stopping, preventing further ill will from arising in your mind. So it's practiced with right effort. You might even say, that when practiced properly, all these factors of the path work together in one human mind. They're present together. Then also the cultivation of right effort, the effort to bring up wholesome dhammas, maintain and sustain and develop further wholesome dhammas. The other side of right effort. When you practice metta bhavana, you're doing that as well, because you're bringing up metta, sustaining it, developing it, making it strong, continuous in your mind. And this has a purifying effect on your mind, because if you keep developing metta, then there's less and less tendency for ill will and aversion and hatred to arise. Gradually you can kind of weed out the more negative side of your karma, your thinking, your personality. To practice metta bhavana also requires mindfulness. And this is where the other aspect of samadhi comes up as well. As we develop mindfulness with the object of metta, say in meditation or just developing an attitude of metta in daily life through our speech, our actions as well, we need to be mindful, need to pay attention to that object, to keep it in mind, to sustain it and develop it. And there's different aspects of mindfulness practice when you're considering metta, goodwill. So if you're practicing goodwill, it has an effect on your body. Physically, you feel different when you have goodwill in your mind than when you have ill will. When you have ill will, you tend to tense up, don't you? You tense your fists, you grit your teeth, you have tension in your muscles. Depending how extreme the ill will, the anger is, the effect on the body will reflect that. So if someone's really angry, you can just see it in their face or the way their body is. And of course their speech and actions will also reflect that. So there's a physical aspect to metta, or the lack of metta. And you can notice that, when you have metta, it softens your physical features. Generally, when you have metta in the mind, it's easier to smile. It's easier to laugh, easier to smile. You might have a twinkle in your eyes. Even your skin and your muscles tend to relax under the influence of metta. So if you've ever been fortunate enough to massage or physically assist an arahant, which may be a rare thing, but if you are that fortunate, if you notice an arahant, they don't have a lot of physical tension in their body. They have a lot of metta. Their muscles are soft. They may still be fit, physically fit, and can still be mobile and walk around and everything, of course, but they don't have a lot of tension in their body. One of the things people noticed with Ajahn Chah in the last years of his life when he was ill was that even though he was very ill with extreme symptoms that could possibly have killed a normal person, at least his flesh, his skin, his flesh was very soft and pink and seemed to be unusually healthy. And everyone put that down to the effect of his samadhi and his pure citta, mind free from greed, anger and delusion, and particularly being free from stress, free from anger. And one of the main causes for ill will is stress, isn't it? When you're tired, you get stressed, you get irritable or even angry. When you're under pressure, you get angry and so on. Stress is one of the big conditioning forces for anger. An arahant doesn't have that anymore. They have no more dukkha, no more stress, so they display metta all the time. And you can actually feel it in their limbs or see it in their body. But even an unenlightened, ordinary unenlightened person will still reflect, the state of mind will reflect in their physical nature of their body. And then also how they use their body. When you're angry, you might do things that are more destructive. When you're angry, you speak more loudly, you bang things down, you slam things down, you knock things. You don't care so much when you're angry. How you use your body reflects your state of mind. When you have metta, your actions tend to be more careful, caring, mindful. So the cultivation of metta and the mindfulness of your posture, your actions, your speech go hand in hand. With metta, you get an accompanying pleasant feeling. Not only is it a physical thing, but it's a mental thing. It's accompanied by a wholesome state of mind, such as metta is accompanied by a pleasant feeling. It's easy to stay with the object of metta, goodwill, when established, because it's pleasant. That may, in the long run, be a drawback as well, something that you have to be careful of, because on a subtle level, we can attach to even the pleasure that comes from cultivating wholesome states of mind. States of samadhi, states of goodwill, compassion can be addictive, and they can be the basis for a subtle sense of self and attachment. But that doesn't mean to say don't develop them. It just means you have to be on the lookout for that. So the Buddha also encouraged us to practice developing panya, insight, discernment, as we practice meditation. So if we're using the object of metta, then we have to reflect on the fact that it's impermanent. It's still what we call a sankhara, a condition of mind. And you mindfully bring up metta and you receive the results of that, the more peaceful state of mind, the relaxed body, which is good. Then you also have to reflect, well, this is still a condition that can deteriorate. It's still unsatisfactory in that sense. It won't last forever because it's a state of mind that you've really, you could say you've created it, you've manufactured it through your own practice. It's a skillful state of mind, but it's still impermanent, unsatisfactory, and ultimately it's not self. And this is another reflection. Once you establish mindfulness and metta, you have to bring up the wisdom and investigate and see, well, this state of mind is not a self. It's not like you're trying to create a new self as you cultivate metta, although you might feel like that at first. Your aim is to purify the mind from all mental states rooted in ill will, aversion, but not to take on a new idea of self, because that will probably come up as you practice. If you get attached to the pleasure, the beauty, because even the Buddha says it's a beautiful mind state. At first we tend to attach to beauty, don't we? We like it, we want it. So if you've been cultivating metta, it might come up that you feel like I am somebody with metta, maybe I'm this new improved me, this person with metta, and it can become another attachment. And that's another cause of suffering if you don't see it, because when the metta fades, maybe something comes along that triggers more anger, so metta disappears, or just naturally over time, so you've been meditating on metta and developing a very peaceful, blissful state of mind, and then it gradually subsides because it's temporary. If you've been attaching to it, you might feel disappointed. So people get disappointed with themselves when they lose their metta, or they criticize themselves, oh, I should have more metta, when the metta has faded, or they long for metta that they've had before. Even the subtle pleasures and blissful states of metta can become a basis for attachment, and then the feelings of loss, disappointment can arise. Another danger that we also have to consider and develop right view around and develop insight around is that with the practice of metta, you may also develop a subtle expectation that now I'm practicing metta, I'm one with metta, practicing metta for the world. Well, the world should respond to that correctly, and we start developing expectations, say, about other people is a common one. If you cultivate goodwill towards others, what we're really aiming to do is to develop goodwill and then let go. But what we often do is cling on. We hold on, and we have the idea, I have metta for you, now you should have metta for me. I love you, you should love me, or I do something for you, you should do something for me. We gain expectations. We want maybe something in return. We want some kind words, some attention in return. We want people to do what we want. We want people to respond in the way we want, according to our perceptions and our desires. So subtly our metta can turn into a cause of suffering because we're not seeing that. So we call the true practice of metta unconditional loving kindness, unconditional goodwill. Not expecting anything in return, not seeking anything in return. So it's quite possible sometimes you practice metta for an individual maybe, and they're still unpleasant to you. It happens. And you might at first, if you don't catch the defilement arising, you might have a feeling of despair or disappointment. You say, oh, I've been so kind to them, why are they treating me like this? And that's because the metta was not yet pure in the way that the Buddha was teaching. It's not yet combined with right view and wisdom and insight. We are still subtly expecting something in return for this metta that we've been developing. There's still a sense of self there. And where you've got a sense of self, then you're open to disappointment, unhappiness. Even though developing metta is a good thing, it can still lead to disappointment when not practiced with wisdom. So we see that all the time, probably most often in families, relationships. You have a relationship, husband and wife, or parents and children and so on, and you're being kind to the people around you, but you're also expecting them to respond according to your terms, on your terms. And they may have different views and different ideas, and you still practice metta, and they've received the metta, but they may still not do what you want. Or sometimes even ourselves. We cultivate metta towards ourselves in a meditation or in our attitude, and you think, now I've developed all this metta, I should be cured of my ill will, my mind should be peaceful, I'm a better person for it. Have all these ideas about ourselves, and then we notice, but I'm still getting angry sometimes, I'm still got this problem, still got that attachment. And we get disappointed with ourselves. We develop metta, but it's not good enough. We walk around saying, my metta is not good enough, or I wasted my time. So whether it's ourselves or other people, with expectations, desires slipping in, metta becomes tainted, and we need wisdom to balance that, to see that danger and remind ourselves it's impermanent, it's not sure. Another aspect of the practice of metta is to realize that if your mind is in a wholesome state, it doesn't necessarily have to be cultivating metta for metta to arise. So we've been talking about the practice of mindfulness of breathing on this retreat. And you notice when you're with the breathing, mindfulness of breathing, and you are mindful of the breath, then metta quite naturally comes to the mind. You may not be turning your mind to consciously develop goodwill towards anyone, but when you focus on a wholesome object, so you have mindfulness with the breath, the 5 hindrances fade away, don't they? They fade away from your experience. And one of the 5 hindrances is ill will. So when you're mindful of your object, whether it's the breath or the body or recollecting the Buddha, any wholesome object, when you bring it to mind with mindfulness, will tend to drive away ill will. Ill will can't establish itself in the mind. Sometimes even people contemplating objects such as death, mindfulness of death, or mindfulness of the body, seeing the body as impermanent, or what we call the asupa meditations, reflecting on the body as unattractive, the unattractive parts of the body. Metta arises quite naturally as ill will subsides. So you contemplate the body and you realize this body is made up of 4 primary elements. It's subject to aging, sickness and death, and decline, it's not self. Then you tend to realize that for every other person in the world, they're exactly the same. Their body is made up of the same 4 elements. Their body is also subject to aging, sickness and death. So contemplating the unattractiveness of the body or the impermanence of this body can bring up metta, because you realize you and others are exactly the same. We're made up of the same 4 elements. We suffer in the same way when we attach to this body and cling to the idea of it as a self, because we want it to be healthy, happy, long-lasting. We want to live forever, basically. That's a delusion. But when you break down that delusion, develop insight towards this body, you realize everyone else is the same. So it naturally brings out a sense of kindness, compassion towards others, because you see there's a certain universal commonality between us and other people. And one of the benefits, whether you're actually directing your mind to develop metta as a meditation, or you're just is like a byproduct from other forms of meditation that you're doing, one of the results is you develop this sense of seeing everyone as more like relatives, rather than being caught into your preferences. I like this person, I don't like that person, this person is in my group, that person is not, and so on. You actually see people more just as relatives, brothers and sisters, which is a very healthy attitude to develop. It keeps your mind calm, and you see something you have in common with everyone else in the world. So metta is an important part of the Buddhist path to enlightenment, something to be developed daily through body, speech and mind. So I encourage you to experiment with that maybe and reflect on that. For the rest of this session we can meditate together and continue until you hear the sound of the bell.